It's like you can like pick up on everything. Like I'd like sit in a chair and it'd like creak and like it would project into the microphone.
But you still get weird shit like that because there's like this little handle on the table.
Does that like get?
Well, we were recording the old Colony cast, and I just fidget. So like I'm fucking fidgeting with it, and Fish is like getting like a weird noise. I don't know what it is, and I'm like, does it sound like this? He's like, what are you doing?
That's funny.
So I mean, they're good, but like they do pick up like vibrations through the table.
All right. Well, I'm shaking my leg pretty viciously right now, so I don't know if you're.
Stop talking and shake your leg. I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't see any blue lines.
Yeah, it's not really. My chair's not touching the table. So,
so this is apparently background noise talk. Yeah. Welcome back, listeners. This is Andy from Inebri-art. Actually recording in person, which I don't do much anymore. We do so much through Zoom now.
Yeah.
Like it came because of COVID and hasn't gone away, and I it's not my favorite thing to do, but we get some really funky, like, cool guests. But today we have a cool guest. We go way back. Like, I was trying to explain, is it, like, close to 20 years? How old are you now?
I'm 30. I'm coming up on 36, so I gotta say it's gonna be
20 years.
20 years, yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So I was actually thinking as I was coming over here that you might be the older the.
What do you mean by oldest?
Not
Rob?
the oldest.
What do you mean oldest?
As far as like the length in which I've known you to actually see you face to face and make plans to hang out with you, even though this is a little bit more formal than my bandmate Mike Dunn, who I've known since I was like 15 years old. I don't think I've known anybody quite as long as you that I still have regular communications with.
That's weird.
That is weird.
That's crazy.
Time just is inevitable. It just marches on.
It does, and it's really fucking weird now after COVID. Oh, sorry, listeners. This is Rob Furness. Obviously a long-time friend, which is why we kind of forget the formalities of like introducing who he is.
Right.
But you've been on the show before. You're a writer, musician, and you're here because you wrote a comic.
I did.
Which I gotta say, like, I got up this morning and was kind of like, all right, what's on my list of things to do today? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yep. And I'm sorry, I still call you Robbie because that's okay. That's how I was introduced to you.
Yeah, some people still call me Robbie.
And I'm like, Robbie's coming in to talk about his comic book. And then I like really thought about it, and I'm like, it kind of gave me like, you have a kid now. When your kid accomplishes something, because I'm like, he was my comic book customer at like 16, and he has written a comic book now. I'm like, I'm really proud of him.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's like, it was definitely my childhood dream. I mean, your comic book shop, being within walking distance made like comics that much more accessible. And, so I grew up reading comics. I was totally into comics when I was in high school, kind of dropped off of them for a bit, but now I'm kind of like all in on them again. But yeah, it was, I think that those like formative years, like hanging out in your shop and going to different Comic Cons, like locally and whatnot, was definitely, and you like never gave me a hard time, even though I like went in there for hours and never spent any money.
Yeah, but to me, that was a comic book shop I grew up in too. It was a hangout.
Yeah.
It was. It's so different now because the comic world is so more accessible to everybody.
Right.
And especially when I was growing up, and even when you were, it was a smaller niche. You were the nerd, a little bit of an outcast. So like every comic book shop I had ever been in at that time, you were like, oh, I'm going to run down the comic shop for a minute, and then 3 hours later,
right? Because
you're like, these are my people.
Yeah.
I found my people, and you could have the nerdiest conversations and borderline arguments, because it was, the internet wasn't quite what it is now.
Right, yeah, I know.
And I got to say, I'm pretty sure I said this last time, but you were right. They made a fucking Ant-Man movie. They're now making 3.
The third one's coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I took my victory lap on the Ant-Man thing the last time I was on the show. But yeah, the new I think they just put out the first trailer for it, and it looks pretty.
It looks really good.
Yeah, it looks really good. So, yeah, I mean, it's comic book fandom. Just isn't what it was 20 years ago. Like we were happy to have like the X-Men movie, even though like they didn't have the original like yellow spandex Wolverine. We were just like happy to have like that and this the first Spider-Man movie. So I think I'm with you in that regard. Is that like you can just going to a comic book shop and just like meeting with your people and just like having conversations and learning about like new artists and new stories and stuff and other like geek stuff like figures and stuff like that. It was great.
Yeah, and like the community was so much that you could, there was so much content at that time, and it's more so now. But like, I mean, comic books are so ubiquitous, and at least the characters are now. People forget Iron Man was like a C-list character when they made that movie. Yeah. He was the biggest character they still own the rights to.
Oh, that's right, because they just sold it.
They sold X-Men, they sold Hulk, they sold Spider-Man.
I read somewhere, and this could be completely off base, but like Marvel was trying to sell like all of their characters to, it was either Fox or Sony or something like that, for like an absurdly low amount of money compared to what those movies make now. And it was just like one of those looking back at it, it's like, imagine if Fox or Sony had taken it, we might not have the MCU, or like we might have like something even more expansive that dates back way further than the MCU.
I don't know if anyone other than Marvel could have done it the way they did it, because they grew it so slowly, so gradually, and with such care. Because I mean, they knew what was great about the characters. Yeah, it wasn't like they're like, we've heard of this character Thor, so we're gonna buy the rights and then write a movie. They're like, we already have the stories written for decades and decades. We're gonna take those comics and convert them into the movies.
Yeah, and that's true. I think that what you were describing there was like can be reflected in like movies like Morbius, not Morpheus.
Did you see it? I never saw it.
I never saw it because I just heard it was.
I saw the trailer. I'm like, I have no interest in seeing this whatsoever.
Yeah, and the same thing with Venom, the Venom movie.
Didn't see those either.
Just they have the character, but they don't know what makes the character great. Right. They just. They know that people love the character, so they're like, we're putting this in a movie. It's gonna make us some amount of money, but then there's like what has connected the character to the readers or the viewers is completely lost in switching from a comic to a movie, and based on like the writing and stuff like that. So it's I guess in that regard, I mean, the MCU probably wouldn't even exist if they had sold it.
And just the idea of like that was the cool thing about comic books. And it was a total marketing thing, but there would be, I don't know, the X-Men would be fighting someone that would and Storm would use her powers to make it snow in New York. And then 3 panels in Spider-Man that month would be like, it's snowing in New York, and him being like, geez, that's weird, and then a little like byline be like, read X-Men number 274 to find out why,
Right, yeah.
But like they all existed in the universe, and as far as a movie universe, that just didn't exist.
Right.
Unless it was like the Star Wars trilogy or something, but
yeah, now everybody's trying to make a universe out of everything,
and they just can't seem to do it.
Well, it's because Marvel just has like almost not 100 years, but what, 70 years, 80 years,
something like that,
of history to sort of go back to.
And they did it slow.
Yeah.
I think that was part of it, is they really took their time and built out the universe, and I feel like that's the thing. DC's too busy trying to play catch up. Yeah. That they're kind of like, oh, we had Superman movie, now let's do a Justice League movie. Like, no, you need to kind of like build up who these other characters are and give them their time.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not like a huge DC person, but I will say that I think Peacemaker is the best like piece of like superhero TV show, movie, anything of 2022. It's a fantastic show.
It was. I think I can count the things I like that DC has done movie video wise on one hand. Shazam, I thought was great.
I didn't see Shazam.
Oh, it's really fun.
I do want to go see Shazam.
I thought the first Wonder Woman was fantastic.
I agree.
It's so weird because I don't count Batman as the DC cinematic universe for some fucked up reason. Like in my head, it's just like separate.
Well, because he's like bigger than anything else they've been able to put out. So it's like he is his own separate thing. Like you don't get to say bad things about any Batman movie, but you can say bad things about Superman movies and things like that because
But like the new one with Robert Pattinson, so long, but it was really good and it was really really dark. And like the newer Suicide Squad I enjoyed, but Peacemaker was like hands down so much fun to watch.
It was great.
John Cena just I'm like, I don't know how they're gonna make. Like, I used to read the Peacemaker comic book,
really,
and was still kind of like, I don't really know much about this guy.
Right? Yeah.
But that's kind of the cool part is where they're now getting to characters that I remember when the Guardians of the Galaxy was announced.
Yeah.
I reached out to Fish. And I'm like, who's in the Guardians of the Galaxy again? and now they're household names.
Yeah, I think there's benefit in going to like C-list characters because their like lore and their history is like a lot less set in stone, and there's not like a rabid fan base that is going to like fact check everything. So you're given a little bit more license to be like goofy and more creative. I was always an Ant-Man fan, but like Scott Lang was like not like a goofy like dad. You know, he was a dad, but he wasn't like this goofball. Like, and Ant-Man was kind of a joke, but like in the original Scott Lang Ant-Man, it wasn't like presented like a joke of a character,
right?
And so, but like they evolved it into that to fit their needs, and I just think that like there's a benefit to having those type of characters like Peacemaker, like Vigilante, like Ant-Man to fill like those specific roles, but like
because Vigilante in the comic book is nothing like that.
Yeah, like he's like a lawyer that like is he's got the traditional like family is killed
vigilante.
Yeah. So it's like, and then you're able to like reimagine them to fit the needs of like the director or the writer, and I mean James Gunn did Guardians of the Galaxy, he did Peacemaker. So I think he's gonna, he's doing he's like in charge of the DCU now,
which I'm really excited about.
Me too. I think every superhero thing that he's done, I think he's done a great job. He did the second Suicide Squad movie,
which I really liked.
I did too. I thought the opening sequence was like hilarious. I was like, I didn't see the first one, so when I was watching this one, I'm like, okay, after the initial opening sequence, I'm like, okay, now what happened? And then like this whole other thing happened. I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is great. And but yeah, so getting back to the point, like just having like C-lift characters, they can really elevate and they can just kind of do whatever they want with them, which I think is huge when you're a creative type.
Yeah. But it all comes from that building of the universe initially.
Yeah.
With the characters that everyone's super defensive about.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So you wrote a comic book, man. That's cool. What is it? What's it about?
All right. So I think...
Is it about like a super cool comic book shop owner?
No, it is not. But no, I think everybody... Well, for me personally, growing up, you knew me. I was big into art, and I always wanted to draw my own comic book. I had like hooked up with people to
and you're no slouch. You draw very well.
Thank you. I draw really well for like within like a high school like classroom environment, but then when I tried to continue to expand on that, came to realize that maybe like I wasn't going to be able to ever like turn out a comic or draw a comic. So I actually fell back on writing, which I also really enjoyed, and we talked a lot on that on the last time I was on the podcast. So the story is, so long story short is I just wrote it, and I had I hired somebody else to draw it. But the long and short of the story is that it's about cryptids who sort of who take on like a superhero persona and try to help fight crime, and they have to sort of go against one of their own in order to save West Virginia. So it has Mothman, and the first issue has Mothman and the Dover Demon in it. So like two of the more well-known cryptids. It's definitely more skewed towards like the Tick versus like an actual like Batman, like dark and brooding, or like The Boys or anything like that. It's definitely like a lighthearted, like kind of for all ages comic book. Which isn't to say that like it's just like nothing but like jokes and whatnot. I think there's a pretty good amount of action in it. So it's only issue 1 out of hopefully like 4. But I'm gonna continue to write. Writing or creating your own comic is very expensive.
Yeah, it is.
And so, especially when you're not the artist, like you got to pay artists. And the artist that worked on my comic, I'm gonna butcher his last name, Matteo Markarowski. He did a fantastic job, and I found him through like a Facebook group. And so he was doing 1 page a week, and he was drawing, inking, coloring, and lettering.
Oh shit! So he did like he did everything.
Yeah. And like I couldn't have asked for like a better person to like work on it with, because he was like super receptive to me being like, okay, this is great, but can you do a little bit different here, just because in panel blah 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 and on page blah 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 something else happens and we need to allude to that. But he did a great job, and he was also great with saying like, I see that in panel whatever you want this to happen, but I think it would look better from a visual standpoint looking like this. And he would oftentimes I would just be like, yes, absolutely, that you're right, that's much better. But so I originally wrote this story, I think like I want to say before COVID, sort of like the world is now before COVID, post COVID. And I kind of like, I presented it to like
BC means something totally different now.
Yeah, right. I know. It's weird that like now life is just kind of like that. But I presented it on a Reddit forum for writing critiques and things like that. And I got some really good feedback. Like people seem to like it. And but I got some feedback. I made some changes, but with the cost of hiring an artist, it's I didn't like have like a grand plan, so I didn't want to like commit any amount of money without like sort of like an end game in mind. And so I kind of shelved that. And then some guy he messaged me on Reddit probably 6 months after I had kind of like made a decision to, that it was done, but there was no, like, I wasn't going to hire an artist or anything. He messaged me and he was like, hey, I run like an online publishing company. How have you been working on this at all? I was like, well, I did all the edits, but I haven't really hired an artist. I haven't really looked for it. It's kind of cost prohibitive at this moment. And he was like, if we split the cost, how would you feel about, me posting it up on my website to have people check it out and whatnot? And I was like, my first thought was like, all right, this feels a little scammy.
Right? What's the angle?
Like, he's like, I'm going to send you a check from, West Union or whatever it's called.
Yeah. I'm going to send you a check for $1,000, but you have to send me a check for $400 first.
Right, exactly. So I was like,
I don't know.
I was a little apprehensive at first, but he sent me his link. It's wondercomics.org. You can actually, it's up on there. In Plain Sight is the name of the comic. And it's totally free. You can see it. So he has a bunch of other comics. And so I was asking him like, well, why my comic? And he was just telling me that he hasn't had that much time to write, but he wants to like continue to work on like that portfolio that he has for his publishing company. So I was like, all right, this all seems pretty kosher. So we went forward and we, I found the artist. He said he gave me money to hire the artist, but I was given license to choose who I wanted, to make any like sort of edits, you know, as far as the story is concerned, and he wouldn't like handcuff me creatively at all. But I used his knowledge because you know, he had a bunch of other comics up there already, so I thought, you know, I could definitely use his like background and history to help me on this endeavor. So yeah, I think I want to say, well, I don't know. However, it was 22 pages long, so however many weeks he was doing a page a week, so over 22 weeks.
So like 6 months.
Yeah. And then it was kind of finished up in August, and then put up on the website around, I want to say like mid to late September. And yeah, I'm really happy with how it all turned out, and I'm actually working on, you know, this second issue right now, in hopes of completing the story arc, because as good as it feels to have like issue 1 done, it still feels unfinished in the sense that there's like, I don't have the complete story arc, written out and available. And so...
and that's one of those things, like, you know, I was in that industry for a long time, and the number of Comic-Cons where I saw people set up and be like, oh, this is issue 1, and it's going to be an ongoing series or a mini series, whatever. And then maybe they get a second issue out and they disappear, because life happens, and this isn't, they're not making Spider-Man money, so it can't be their like full-time gig.
Chances are they're not making any money.
Yeah, exactly. They're pretty much just trying to recoup costs and get their story out.
Yeah.
But so many like creators of that type never finished their story, or took a decade to get a 4-part miniseries out. So it's really, and that's one of those things where like, I'm glad that there's you're working with another company that at least seems to have some sort of funds going in that can help get it out.
Yeah, I think I want to say a couple years ago, when I originally came on the podcast, I was talking about how I was writing for wrestling. I was, and I wasn't making a lot of money, and I think I kind of had like a come to Jesus moment where I was just like, I have to kind of maybe not accept the fact, but like be comfortable with the fact that I'm not going to ever be like make money doing this. There's like a very minuscule, chance that I'll ever make any money doing this, but I have to be comfortable in the fact that I'm doing this for myself, more than anything else. And then I think that like helped me, like motivate me to just keep working, because like there is no like, like this is what failing looks like, because I'm just doing it to make myself happy. And as long as I feel good doing it, then
you don't fail.
Then I don't fail.
Yeah.
And so like that's what's sort of just been motivating me throughout, like, when I was doing it originally, and now as I work on the second issue, is just doing it for my own self, I guess. Obviously the readers are a big part of it. You always want people to like what you write, and
sure.
and the whole thing. And I put a great deal of like pride and effort into it. But I think going back to what you said at the Comic-Cons, like that's why my first issue, that it's free online, and because I wouldn't want anybody to be like, oh, I bought the first issue and like now it's never done. Now you can just go on, you can see it online.
George R. Martin?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. And so you can just go online free to read it. Like there's literally, you don't have to sign up. There's not even an excessive amount of ads or anything on it. So or on the website, that is, you can just click and just view through them, through each page. And so I don't know. I don't really know where I was going with it outside of like just saying.
Well, it's one of those like, I mean, the podcast, there's something about someone who's genuinely interested in doing something.
Yeah.
There are people that start companies as like get rich quick schemes, and some of them, I feel like that's a tech thing. You know, like if you can create a company and sell it for $1 billion,
right.
But if it's a creative thing, it's really about what does it do for you. And we started this podcast, and we never expected to make any money from the podcast. We're like, this just sounds like fun. We like podcasts. We think we like podcasting. And we're like 320 episodes in. I think,
wow.
you know.
That's insane.
Yeah, I think we like it.
I'd say.
And it is that I don't care if I make a dime from this. It's nice that we're starting to see some, you know, sponsorships and stuff like that. But it's not about that. And the idea of if you set, I'm a big board game person, and like every board game has a win condition,
right?
You know, like if you set your win condition to be rich, you're probably going to fail 99% of the time,
right?
But if you're like, I want to have fun and meet cool people, or you know, get my story out in front of people, it takes a lot of stress off because you're like, well, I'm doing what I want to do, and then it just makes life a lot easier. The nice thing is then you get to have all the fringe benefits that come along with doing weird shit. Because people, like, the number one question when, you know, people find out I'm a podcaster, they're like, oh, do you make a living at that? I'm like, no. Like, very few people make a living at podcasting. But I get to do some cool shit that people don't get to do.
Right.
You know, I took a private tour of the Lizzie Borden house.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it was awesome. You know, and then I got a phone call from the Fluff CEO.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, like Lord Fluff or whatever, you know. It's just like weird shit that doesn't, you know, that becomes cool stories.
Right.
You know. Do you plan on setting up at Comic-Cons and stuff?
I would like to in some form or fashion eventually.
Yeah.
We were just talking about our ages earlier. I'm only 36, which feels still pretty young to be in the game, you know. And so
Stanley didn't start until 40. I think he was 40 when he made Spider-Man.
Yeah, so like
I helped make Spider-Man. Sorry.
Yeah, I still think there's time to to build up to that, but it's slow going. It's like it's important to like start off and establish yourself, and as like there are a lot of like those get rich quick schemes where it's like you fund like a Kickstarter or something like that, and then you don't see that everything starts falling, the wheels start falling off on the project. I think ideally what I would like to do is get all 4 of these out, and then once all 4 are done, just publish like in physical print form a trade paperback for all 4, or do a trade paperback with like 4 individual issues available as well. I did try to do this other comic in a while back, and while I still think there's like some premise there that I can tap into, I didn't have like a sort of like an end goal, like a win condition. It was just sort of like a stream of consciousness, and I was like dumping a lot of money into it to get it published and written, drawn. And I think that like kind of like made me realize I took a step back and like reset and was like, all right, how do I need to go about this? Like, what do I need to do this next time to make sure that like things go more smoothly? And that's when I started to like reach out more to different artists artists and writers and stuff to get their feedback. So I think I was thinking about doing this first issue, like printing it out, because it's really not that expensive to print out. I mean, it's expensive. Like, you don't make any money, but it's not like that expensive to get like 10 or 20 copies done. But I don't know that like I don't think that that would help me establish myself any more. Just this being my first comic being published. So I think the digital way of going it will be better. But I mean it's hard to like establish reader base. Like it really is. Like every people are always you'll see in comments or whatnot. It's like, what's the fastest way to get a reader base, or how can I do that?
How do you build listenership?
Yeah. And they're always the common response is, well, just put a completed work together and hand it out, or have, link people. And it's like, you can do that till you're blue in the face. But like, some people they'll just say that they're waiting for you to finish something, and then they'll actually never take the opportunity to read it. And so, establishing a reader base or viewership base is probably is harder than writing the comic itself. It's especially like social media platforms. It can feel like you're just yelling into an empty void of nothingness. You're like, please just read that. Like, just read this. I don't care if you tell me you hate it. Like, I just want somebody to give. I want some feedback. Luckily, all the feedback that I have gotten has been pretty good, actually. The comic book shop, no offense, Andy, the comic book shop I go to now.
Whatever. Which one? You can give a shout.
The Laughing Shield in North Attleboro.
Okay.
I take a pretty long trip. It's like 35 minutes from my house, but it's just a great shop, and the owner there is extremely nice. He read it. He was like, if you ever print it out, let me know, and I'll carry it at my shop. And he said it was great. The art, he loved the art. Same thing. He said the story was good, and so finding that viewer or the reader base is definitely the trickiest part. It's I'm quite honestly at a loss. So I think until I like establish myself as a reader, as a writer, there's not really any. I don't have any real benefit to printing out a physical form, book.
So this is one of those things that I think is a struggle for creative people. And let's call them normies. Don't get it. Because they look at someone who can write or play music or draw and be like, oh my God, you're so talented. Like, you woke up one morning and was just like, hey, look what I can do.
Yeah.
But you spend so much time working on your craft that when you get to the point where you feel like, hey, maybe I can sell this, I have no idea how that works.
Yeah.
Because that is a legit whole other skill set. And, in art school, they don't teach, any kind of business or marketing.
Right.
I heard Inebri-art does, which I think is fucking cool. But it is a whole concept of, if you put something out, you get that push of, my friends and family, bought a copy, or
right, yeah.
You're like, you don't have to buy it, and they're like, no, I'm going to give you the $3 or $5, whatever comic. Yeah. And you're like, you don't have to. And you're like, no. So you do okay with your first CD, your first comic, whatever. And then you're like, okay, cool. All my family, all my friends have it. How do I get it in front of total strangers?
Right.
And that is like the $64,000 question, because we don't, at this level, we don't have huge marketing budgets, if we have marketing budgets at all.
Yeah, mine is zero.
Yeah. So then it becomes, how do I get people interested and in front of people for little to no money?
Right.
And there's some tricks. Because I've spent a lot of time researching this shit. And one thing is to go where your customers are. And comic book shops are very familiar with independent press, so a lot of them will carry it.
Yeah.
But usually it's like, drop off a couple copies, and I'll sell them. I'll give you, whatever the split is. You put them on the shelf. They sit on the shelf. Maybe they don't move. Maybe they do move. But it's like 5 copies. You're like, am I going to drive to Weymouth to pick up $12 if they all sold, or like $4 if one, whatever the number is? It's just like, it's not worth it. I think for bang for the buck for a creator like yourself, the best thing to do is like in-store appearances. So it would be like Free Comic Book Day is always a big one, but like you can always just be like, hey, can I come in some Wednesday evening? Wednesday's the day. Or like on a weekend.
Yeah.
And being like, just set up a table and, promote. And where it's free online, you can just sit there with a QR code.
Right.
And talk to people, put up, get a couple signs printed up or whatever. And then just talk to people. And, there's a thing in the comic book world where everyone is interested in meeting creators because you just don't know who that's going to be.
Right.
Comic books are so fascinating because you could be like, oh, I met this guy and he had this weird comic book that, it's on an independent label that no one's ever heard of. And, oh, what's it called? Oh, it's called Men in Black. I don't really,
Yeah.
And next thing you know, it's like the biggest movie with Will Smith in it.
Right, yeah. Everybody's like, that could be the next Kevin Eastman.
Eastman, yeah. And it's still, like, stuff like that still happens. Like a comic idea in Hollywood's always kind of keeping their eyes on anything that builds up like that. So there's this kind of interest in, like, is this the next big thing? Let's talk to him. Oh, he's a cool guy. I'll buy one of his comics. And I think everyone's collection is a good chunk of, like, I met this guy. It's random. He signed it. It was good. I never found another issue, but
right. I could never find another issue.
But like a lot of times people don't mind throwing, like, it's like the oldest version of Kickstarter.
Yeah.
We're like, yeah, I'll throw you $5 for your, you give me the comic book, sign it, we'll have a chit chat, and good luck.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that I honestly, that's something that I'm not like a huge people person. I love getting in front of people that I know and talking, but I am like a super shy person in, one-on-one conversations. But, getting out in front of the people, the readers would be probably a dream come true as well, like.
And then if you do it enough, you have like these weird experiences, because I used to do the comic shows, selling artwork and stuff. And like someone would come up and they'd be like looking at the template and they'd point to like a print and be like, "Oh, I have this," and you'd be like, "Are you fucking really?" Yeah. And like I remember one guy came up and I'm like, "Oh, if you have any questions," he's like, "I came to find you." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "No, I knew you were here and I came to find you." And I'm like, "Oh, don't say that. That's fucking weird." Yeah. And it's that like unreal, like stop liking my stuff. That's like, yeah, I appreciate that you like it, but you like it a lot. And that's just weird. Like that takes some getting used to.
Yeah. Yeah. You used to run, like Boston Comic Con. You used to sell art prints in art.
Boston, Hartford, one up in New Hampshire. I can't remember where that one was. I mean, for a while I did a bunch of them.
I remember all of the pictures and stuff on Facebook. That was cool.
And we did a Walker Stalker Con in New Jersey. It was a Walking Dead convention. And like the first like hour or so was so dead. And I was drawing, I was doing like, my prints or whatever.
Yeah.
But I was doing commissions of people, like caricatures of people as zombies. Mm-hmm. And I literally did like 2 weeks pay in like one afternoon.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't stop. And it was at one point I just threw money at my friend. I'm like, "Go get me food and a beer because I'm dying."
Yeah.
And we did so well that like we decided we were going to do the Walker Stalker Con, and I think it was Orlando. So we flew down and got a hotel. I'm like, like even if I break even, it'll be like a nice little vacation. Dude, I lost so much money that week.
Oh, no.
You just never know. But it's doing that stuff was a lot of fun. And I got out when it stopped being fun.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I found some people got a little too big for their britches. You had guys that had no credits in the comic book world who were acting like they were celebrities.
Oh, right.
Like, how dare they do this to me? I'm like, bro, you're no one. Like, yeah. I'm no one either, but like...
We're equally
no
one.
Yeah. Like, I get it. Like, I have, quote-unquote, fans that come by my table, but... What, like 8 this year? Like, let's be realistic. And so, yeah, I mean, and it's funny because we do so many events now. Like, so we do these markets, and they've been huge for us. And, we met so many cool people, and it's a lot of fun. And one came along that runs at the same location that we do, and it's one of our really good locations. And the location's like, oh my God, this market that we had last week fucking destroyed. They're like, it was so great, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like kind of hurt. But they bill it as a punk rock flea market.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, it's really cool. It's a cool niche. You know, like I get it. It's got a whole different vibe to it. And I'm like, I wonder if you could do like one of the small comic shows, you know, not a comic. It would still be a Comic-Con. That's what you call them now. But like there used to be small ones at like VFWs.
Yeah,
There'd be
for
like
sure.
40 dealers, mostly comic books. You get the occasional person in an Ant-Man costume. But like, I'm like, I wonder if I could do something like that, and you know, bring in some local creators and you know, people trying to sell their books. And
Yeah.
So like that was like, I don't know, maybe that's a 2023 thing. So
yeah, I mean, there still are local comic book shows, but I do think that a lot of them have like sort of consolidated into just like larger ones, like the Pillars in Boston. Like I think Wicked, Comic-Con. There's like the Boston Fan Expo now,
which is such a weird thing. I think and again, I've been out of the game for a long time. The guys that run Wicked, I believe, are the same guys that started Boston Comic-Con, which sold it to Fan Expo.
Right? Yeah, because they had their first one like last season or whatnot, and I went, and it was like when they said it was our first one, I was like, okay, this will be kind of like a small intimate like comic. Nope, it was still humongous.
Yeah.
There was like the venue was obviously too small for the amount of people that were like interested in it. It was crazy. Like everybody was packed in like sardines, and it was not uncomfortable, but it was like it was definitely like, okay, you guys definitely need a bigger venue for next year, and I would be surprised if they don't have a bigger venue. I forget where it was held this year, and it was awesome. If you don't go into a Comic-Con with a plan, it's just like chaos in your mind and everything. Yeah. Like I did not go in with a plan at all. I was my comic book collection was like growing, but it wasn't like I hadn't identified what I was like into, I guess. And so I just ended up walking around like 3 or 4 times and just like handpicking a couple of comics here and there, like mostly Ninja Turtle comics. And then leaving and being like, man, I feel like I did nothing there. I walked around for 3 hours and I didn't do anything.
Yeah,
you know,
they can be so overwhelming. Like I've always been a collector of something.
Yeah.
And, you know, like comics and CDs, I was like, bought a shit ton of CDs like back in the day. Yeah. And I remember like, you'd be like, oh man, I want this album, I want this album, I want this album, I want this album. And then you'd find like this cool used CD store and you'd get in there and be like, what's music?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Exactly.
And so you just flip through and you're like, I don't know any bands anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens is like you forget what titles you're reading. Yeah. You forget like what artists you enjoy. You're like, what artists are even here today? Like,
and then someone comes over generally, hey, do you need any help? And you're just like, I'm just looking because I can't think. Don't ask me a question.
No, I'm just browsing. Browsing. That's all. That's my go-to. You know, even though like I'm like maybe I've found or thought of some comic that I want and I'm looking for it, and he's like, can I help you? I'm like, no, I'm good. You know, even though it saved me 25 minutes if I was just like, hey, do you have, you know, whatever issue numbers?
Yeah. I remember those days, man. Like you'd sit in front of like 20 boxes of comics and someone would be like, do you have such and such? And you'd just be able to be like, no. Yeah. Like I somehow knew 1,000 and 2,000 comics what I had in front of me. It was bizarre. Like,
yeah, you just must have had like some like photographic memory or like an inventory list of like a.
I was telling because I'm fucking horrible with names.
Yeah,
like, so bad. We were recording Bar Talk, and so I'm going around the table introducing. I'm like, oh, and we're here with Mel, and they're like, his name's Lou, and I'm like, shit. So we recorded for an hour where I called him Lou. We took a break, recorded the next episode, and I'm like, and we're here with blah blah blah, and Mel, and they're like, his name is Lou. But I could probably look at a picture of G.I. Joe weapons and be like, this one belongs to Sci-Fi. He came out like in '84, and this is what he looks like, and this is the other. I don't know why my brain works that way.
Yeah, right. It's just how it's wired.
Yeah, so that's, you know, why my shop was pretty solid, you know, because like it was. It was for. There's two types of comic book shops.
Yeah, I know it about. I know the two.
Yep. There's the stuff where it's like it's new and then it's gone, and then there's the one that you walk in and it's dark, and you're like, I bet you probably rains inside when it rains, and it's got that weird old paper smell, and there's boxes on the floor, and that's the ones where you find like those hidden gems. Yeah. That was my store.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, we just had tons of back issues and all sorts of bins of like, oh, that's loose figures. Go dig over there in the loose figure bin. But shit, that's where I met Fish.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. He came in. This is how broken he is. I forget what he was looking for. It might have been Superman. It was around the Civil War time. The comic books, not the movie.
Oh.
And he asked me if I had something. I cannot remember what it was, and I shit on him. Like, really? You're reading that piece of crap? And he's like, "Oh, I like it here."
Yeah, I like the cut of this guy's jib.
Yeah, but that was kind of the fun part. Like, it was never hostile. It was more, just busting balls and
Yeah, I will say about your shop, there was never like a lack of stuff to look at.
Yeah.
There was always like something happening, something doing, or something new. And it was so expansive. I feel like for almost the duration that you were at the original shop.
Yeah.
Like the previous antique shop owner was moving stuff out.
It was a weird setup. Yeah. And it kept growing and and that was just one of those. Every business kind of grows, and like at the beginning you're like, all right, I'm going to buy these couple of figures at retail and try to resell them for a markup. I'm going to find it cool shit at a yard sale or thrift store or whatever. And then it gets to the point where people are walking in with 12 long boxes of comics, and they'd be like, I want $100. I'm like, cool, here's $100. And then you start looking through it, and you're like, oh shit, I kind of ripped that person off. But then you were buying bigger and bigger collections. I remember like one time some guy, oh man, I think it was like 30 long boxes of comics and like 25 boxes of miscellaneous toys and action figures, and like he was a collector and just dumped his entire collection. And it took weeks to go through it all, and
that's crazy.
Yeah, so it was fun. I don't miss it, but I look back fondly.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be a ton of work. We've talked, in Facebook, messages and whatnot about like the prospect of, or for me, the idea of opening up a shop and things like that, because, because I like the idea so much. And, but yeah, it just seems like a ton of work, like the inventory, and also you're a small business owner. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, like your inventory or your product, the price for it is constantly changing depending upon the market. It's not like, it's not like a Walmart where you just buy something, you put it on the shelf, and
that's $9.
And it stays that price forever. Like, one like change in like who the director is in a upcoming film can, change the price, of the first appearance of some character
by like 300%. Yeah, like it's crazy.
Yeah,
it was, and people definitely who like their first time would come in the store or whatever. And then after a while, you get to know them and befriend them. And then they'd have like this moment where they'd like confess to you and like, hey, first time I came in here, I bought the one I'm thinking of. It was this comic book called Goon.
Okay, yeah.
He's like, I bought the first issue of Goon here for like $5. And he's like, I sold it for like $100. And I'm like, cool. Like, that's shame on me. Like trying to price 300,000 comics or whatever, like trying to get that store open. You're like, yeah, after a while you're just like,
yeah,
get a price, get it out. Don't.
I mean, especially on those back issue ones,
They get lost in a bin. You forget. Yeah.
Yeah, you had. I mean, you must have. I can't remember exactly how many boxes you had, but just like out on the shop floor was like
I probably
had to have been like at least 20, at least in that first main room, right?
I think collectively I had close to 100 boxes, and you figure each one.
They're all long boxes.
Yeah,
too.
we're like, I don't know, 250 comics.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a lot of comics.
Yeah, it's a lot of comics, man.
And then there's always like 15 to 20 of those that are like, I wish someone would just buy these for kindling. Because no one's going to buy these ever.
Yeah.
And yeah, there were, it was a trip, man. Like, I remember one guy came in and he brought a box of comics, and it was all just garbage.
Yeah.
Just like no one reads that. And I forget, he like threw me an offer. I'm like, yeah, no thanks. And he's like, you wouldn't offer me anything? I'm like, man, if you left that here and walked away, I'd be annoyed.
Right.
He was kind of pissed, but I'm like, I'm just being honest. Like, no one reads that. Like, it would be in my 25-cent bins forever.
Right. It'd just be taking up space. Valuable space. Yeah. I think things have changed since then, man. Like, those comics there are comics, obviously, that nobody reads still, but, like, man, speculation just runs wild in the comic book industry now, especially since the emergence of the MCU and now, like, everything is getting, picked up for, like, TV show or a Netflix movie or whatever. I think like the most recent example that I can think of is Something Is Killing the Children, the comic book from Boom.
I don't even know that one.
Yeah, so it's actually pretty good. I think the first issue came out in like 2016. I might be incorrect, but that first issue had like 8 reprints for it, and now like the first issue, like if you can get it graded, 9.8 or whatnot, is like thousands of dollars, but it's like a modern book. Like you never really expect modern books to be like that sought after, that much money, but it's like it got optioned for TV show, so like people are like, oh baby. And also it's like a pretty good it's a really good story, and I've since jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember I was at, oh my god, why am I blanking on his name? I was at a comic book show in Boston, and the guy who writes Walking Dead.
Oh, Robert Kirkman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kirkman was a guest.
Yeah.
And I just started getting into Walking Dead. It was like maybe 20 issues in. And like I'm walking around the show and some guy's like Walking Dead #1. And I'm like, hey man, how much is that? And he's like, oh, it's like 125. I'm like, ugh, 125. Yeah. Like now I'm like looking back, I'm like, I would kill for Walking Dead for 120. Like I don't even know what it goes for, but like it's in excess of 1,000. And I'd be able to get Kirkman to autograph it.
Right, yeah. I did the same thing with Punisher back when I was younger, or the first the first appearance of Punisher. That used to be like a $50 book when I was first collecting. And now it's like, again, graded, whatever, blah, 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 but you're talking like $2,000. And I was like, man, I wish I had just bit the bullet and spent $50 on that comic back then. Because, man, that would be a nice little, like...
every time I like really want to hate myself, like I'll just go back and I'll start like looking up things that I knew I had in the store and like, DC Select figures or busts or whatever. And some are just like, God damn, like...
Yeah.
Damn it.
It's if you're into like, self-punishment and stuff, that's definitely something you can do. Yeah. My original collection, I had like... At one point, I had unloaded like 9 boxes of comic books just for free. I don't even know where they went, just to like whatever comic book store, for probably like $25. And just like thinking back, like, man, if I really hope that there was nothing in there that was worth more than $25, because that would be a bummer.
Yeah, but that's part of that whole industry, and you really had to know your stuff. Yeah. Like, I mean, there were comic conventions that I remember doing where, like, you always do like that pre-show, after you set up, you do the pre-show walk. and a guy had McFarlane figures, and I knew a guy who was looking for the Chase figure, and he was looking for the whole set. And I'm like, well, how much are your McFarlane figures? And he's like, oh, they're not really selling at the shop, so $5 a piece. So I'm like, I'll take a complete set and however many of, I think it's Mrs. Claus. And he's like, okay, cool. And I walked like 100 feet away and put them on my table. You know, I put the set aside for the guy who wanted them. But then I put like the Mrs. Claus out for like $25, $30, whatever it was going for. And I pretty much made the majority of my money back just from that one figure. And he came down later in the show. He's like, hey, man, someone just told me that you had like Miss Claus out here for like $30. I'm like, yeah, man, it's like a super hot figure. And he was so cool. He's like, that's on me. Yeah. You know? And I'm like, kinda.
Yeah. It's just the risk that you take being in such a like a speculative industry is just like sometimes you're just gonna walk 50 feet and the figure's gonna be worth 20% more.
And you can't know everything. And like I found the store had a different type of market opposed to online, opposed to conventions, and that was like the heyday of eBay. Like, I made so much money off of eBay. Yeah, eBay's a tough thing now. Yeah, like I don't even go on it ever. I go on it to buy, but I would never sell on it anymore. It's just it's too muddied. Yeah, but I feel like we lost. We are definitely on a tangent. Yeah. But then, because we've known each other for fucking ever. I know. Well, I enjoy talking comic books. So. Yeah. Oh, who doesn't? Right? Like, it's been a long time. And, when I really started kicking around the idea and, like a smaller Comic-Con, I'm like, do I really want to do that? Is that? Yeah. But I'm like, it's been a long time. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, do I even have the contacts that I used to have, But, it'd be interesting. It's on my radar as a possibility. I think the sort of like encompassing theme is that really you should just do things for your own self-enjoyment. Yeah. And then just the good things will come to you as you keep working at it. And it's really interesting that you phrased it that way, because initially when we started Inebri-art, I was working at Home Depot and I was looking for a way out. Yeah. I fucking hated it. And I wanted to, I'm like, oh, can this be a business? Right. And I was listening to Bruce Campbell, and I don't remember what they were talking about, but they're like, oh, you've been working with Sam Raimi forever. And he's like, yeah, he's like, because when we started working together, we broke down, and this was like his advice for people creating anything. If you're working with someone else, he's like, you break down the responsibility and your ownership percentage right away. Mm-hmm. He's like, it's a lot easier to split $5 than $5 million. Right. So he's like, if you have it laid out, there's no hard feelings that when you get to $5 million, you're like, hey, I'm only 12% owner because that's what I agreed to in the beginning, but hey, I still get 12% of $5 million. Right. Opposed to getting to the $5 million and being like, well, I feel like I did a little more than 12%, so so we had that conversation in the beginning of like who's doing what, who gets what percentage, and it kind of floundered for a bit, and we went through some changes as who was part of it, as a lot of businesses and friendships happen. Right. But then we kind of stepped back, and I was like, all right, this isn't going to get me out of Home Depot, and I ended up at another job. But then it kind of just became like, well, let's see if we can get our friend who's an artist some more exposure. Let's do this because it sounds like fun. Yeah. Let's do this because we just want to do this. And that's kind of how it evolved, and now it is my full-time job, just because of that mindset where I wasn't like, how do I get rich? Right. It literally became, is it going to be fun? Let's give it a try. Yep, absolutely. My my aunt, who's actually a really talented artist, and she's trying to get into the whole children's book publishing realm. She's been grinding for probably 10 years
trying to get into that, and she keeps going for it, and like she's honestly a big inspiration for my writing, and I've told her as such, just because she's so determined. And I think she said that like creative people just need to be creative, and like whether it works out and you're able to like leave your full-time job at Home Depot to start doing all this other stuff and helping your art friends get exposure and doing all these podcasts and things like that and all these cool events, or if you're just typing away in your basement for hopes that you can publish a comic online or run a any kind of business, anything you love, you just if you can just create, then you'll find happiness and joy, I guess.
That's so true. Like, I mean, you were helping me like during COVID. I started work on a movie script, and it wasn't because I really feel. I think the story's good, but I don't feel like. I don't know, like if that's ever gonna go anywhere. Like that script could be found like 20 years after I'm dead, and someone would be like, "Oh, this is a good script. Let's make this."
Yeah.
But like it was a dark time for everybody, and I'm like, I just need to do something. Yeah. And that's kind of where I felt my creative juices flowing. So like I'm like, all right, let's give this a try. And I've gone back to it a few times. It's still like needs a lot of work, but it is. The creative people will create regardless of what job they have. Yeah. Whether it's they work in an office and it's like that time of like Christmas and like, oh, people can decorate their cubicles. There's always that one person and you're like, I mean, you didn't have to make your cubicle into a giant castle with like snow but they're like, yeah, but I really wanted to. It's like that kind of, it scratches that itch.
Right, exactly. Yep. Whatever it may be. So
keeps us sane.
It does.
Sort of.
I mean, as sane as we can be.
Yeah. So it doesn't feel like it, but we've been going for a long time.
Okay. I thought we might be. I don't know. Yeah,
no, but it's just one of those like after a while I'm like, oh yeah, we're like on not a time limit, but where can people go to find the comic?
Okay. wondercomics.org. So, wondercomics.org. In Plain Sight, #1 by Rob Furness.
Nice. Yep. And you are starting working on the second, but you like don't have a time frame for it, or?
I'm going to complete the rough draft of the first this issue #2 this week. Actually, I have some time off, so I'm actually working on that. I've been working on another like more specifically horror comic as well. So now I'm trying to like think about other genres that I want to get into a little bit, because
the floodgates are opening.
Yeah.
That's how it always is.
I have like a notebook. I try to do like some actual writing versus typing, because I feel like it's a little bit easier to just like jot down ideas. So I have a little notebook that I'm always like writing in at night and stuff. So so I'm trying to like put together those stories as well. So I'm working on a bunch. I'd like to get the issue #2 script done, and then the other story, which doesn't really have a title, but it's like a horror thing about a trash monster.
Okay.
So I've always like wanted to have a story about a trash monster, so I was like, I'm going to do a horror story.
Immediately
about a
think of Fraggle Rock.
Oh, I'm familiar with Fraggle Rock, but
there was the trash heap.
Oh, all right.
She was like the wise like sage.
Oh, nice.
But trash monster, cool.
Yeah. So those are the two things I'm working on now.
Cool. All right. Is there a social media where people can go and check up on what you're working on? Like, do you?
No, I don't really post on it. I don't really.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm gonna I gotta like redo my whole social media stuff because it is a big thing, but it just like never gets any traction. I feel like I gotta like make some specific changes.
It is literally another fucking job.
Yeah.
Like and that's one of those things where people are like, oh, I don't know how to promote. Like, do you have social media? Yeah. Well, how often do you post on it? They're like, I don't know, like once every 6 months. Like, yeah, no one sees that.
I try to post pretty frequently, but what ends up happening is like I just like then it like sort of just becomes like a stream of not stream of consciousness, but like it becomes a little bit of everything, and it's not like hammered down into one certain thing. So it's like it's got a lot of stuff about wrestling, and then I tried to have like all of my comic book stuff on there as well, but it's just nothing's like picking up traction of anything. So
and it's one of those, it changes so goddamn much. Where they're like, oh, you have to have posts with photos.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't have words in your photos, or it doesn't go as. Oh, well, now that's not the same anymore. Oh, now you got to do videos. Now you got to do videos in this format. Now you got to do videos that are this long and this style and da 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 da. And you're like, I hate you.
Exactly. Yeah.
I actually had a couple of phone meetings with a guy that works at Meta to like help our advertising, and at the very first phone call, I'm like, I just want to let you know up front, I hate your company. And he goes, that's fair. Most people do. I'm like, all right, cool. I like you.
At least he was honest.
Yeah. Like, he's like, I get it. So listeners, make sure you check out Rob's stuff, and check out his movie when it comes out. And
yeah. Amazon Prime. Give me a call.
Yeah,
It's totally up for
Hulu or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, man, it was a really good catching up. And
Thanks.
when an Amazon comes out, we should go see it.
Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
love to. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And the whole time I'll just be like, you're right. You were right the whole time.
You can buy the popcorn.
All right.
For me, as an I told you so.
All right, that's fair. So, all right, listeners, we'll catch you guys again next week. And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. So thanks again for listening.